Hello, everyone, and welcome back to another episode. Today, we're going to take a break from the focus on India, and we might do this every few episodes between our focused videos. And what these are for are to remind you all that we are not just talking about specific regions of the world here. We are talking about a global phenomenon with these nubs. So what we want to do today is kind of just spitball and start off in a famous place at one of our favorite nubs, and we will just branch off and see where the conversation goes. So today I'm joined again by Phil from the Ancient Alternative View. Phil, how are you doing today?
Very well, thank you. What an honour to be here again to
Mhm.
talk about the nub phenomenon,
Mhm.
and probably one of the most famous nubs we're ever going to find
Agreed.
in the world. There is not a better example of the internal workings of a nub than what we're looking at here. This is the portcullis nub
Mhm.
of the Great Pyramid
That's right.
in Egypt. I'd like to thank Larry at AIP for this specific photo.
Of course.
We have other ones ourselves, Andrew, but
Yes.
when we look at this nub is specific to a certain set of engineers that made the internal workings of the Great Pyramid. So
Mhm.
this isn't just a hallmark. This isn't just something that you and I found on stone around the world. It isn't just a language. It isn't just one variation. No, no.
No.
This nub on the portcullis tells us that these were the builders of the Great Pyramid. Don't you agree?
And many other sites. This specific shape that we've seen countless times. We've seen it in Myra, Turkey. We've seen it in South America and Peru. This sideways capital D shape, or our standardized nub.
Standardized. The
Yes,
standardized nub,
standardized
yes.
nub. This seems to follow us everywhere we look for nubs. And to find it
Yeah.
at the core of the Great Pyramid, I mean, come on. Yes, there's other places as well in Egypt where these show up, but everyone talks about the pyramids, Giza. We have at the core, the very core of the most impressive structure, we have not only a normal nub, but the archetypal nub. It's very
But you've
curious.
also got to look at, Andrew, that people discuss the casing stones of the pyramid
That's
through
right.
Khufu and his son and what's written in history.
Hmm.
We can look at written history all day long, can't we?
That's true.
But let's be honest, this is written in stone
Yes.
within the internal buildings, the engineering schematic
Yes, this is not
of
something
the
that can be
Great Pyramid.
forged. This is not
No,
a document that can be mistranslated by a scribe or
no,
anything. No, this is mute testimony in the stone for all time. That's going to show us,
yeah,
you know,
yeah.
the
In
events
the
of the past.
internal workings of the Great Pyramid. So
Yes,
when you and I found this, we found different photographs of this,
only a couple.
which
Yes,
show, yeah, there are only a few, and a schematic as well,
yes,
that show the portcullis. Now, this is what we describe, you and I, with our phenomenon, as a standardized circular
hmm,
shape nub.
hmm,
And people can recognize this as the internal workings of the Great Pyramid.
that's right.
It
Yes,
was a functional part of the Great Pyramid.
that's right.
No one can take that away from us. It's right there in front of you in stone.
Yes, and the fact that there are only few photos of this, thank you to Larry. I think we have what Megalithic Maiden's short little clip in her video, and these scant few photos that we can find on Google. There are very very few photos of these artifacts and the internal workings in general of these structures.
Yeah, agreed. And the portcullis was a working part of the pyramid. So when we listen to other engineers, other ancient researchers, the people that have had a similar idea to us, we look at what we've learned through our degrees and through other people's degrees and through engineering, through what physical evidence might mean.
Yes.
This is actually a physical evidence point of view that shows that we have found a standardized version of something that works within the Great Pyramid that everyone looks at
That's right.
so vigilantly, Andrew.
Of course.
And we are now looking at the workings of that. Now,
The most complicated part.
if we were going to look at an engineering point of view towards the pyramids, then we would have to take into consideration A, the physical evidence, which shows us the standardized nubs that we've looked at.
Yes.
B, is it a circuit? Is it something that has gases going through it? Is the water that was used through it, through our maybe two-dimensional version of events, could we apply what maybe our ancients were looking at to an engineering phenomenon that applied our nubs as a marker, because they're there, we've seen them within the physical evidence.
Yes.
Now, we've seen vitrification on a specific photo, but nonetheless, the standardized version of the nub remains on the portcullis chamber. That is factual, isn't it, Andrew?
Yes, and even with what we're looking at right here, this diagram, it is not completely accurate. And every diagram you look at, you cannot trust 100%, especially any computer-generated, these recent computer-generated models of the insides. I wouldn't trust any of them, unless you actually have a 3D scanned, replication of the inside of something. You're not going to be able to trust what it's telling you. Like, for example, here, the entrance where this man is standing. From this illustration, it looks like there's no room between the entrance and the front of the slab. So in this diagram, there would be no space for someone to take a photo of the nub, right? So you'd have
Completely agree.
You'd have to look at different diagrams, and we can just jump over to Google, really, and we've got lots of them over here. First of all, here's the photo in question. This is a horrible quality photo, by the way, guys. This is it. This is as big as you get. I'll blow it up a little bit. But yeah, so someone obviously is able to look up and take a photo of this nub. So there's a space, and then therefore you can actually go up and over. You can circumvent these portcullis slabs. And I believe I saved, yes, again, a very tiny little diagram, but someone has taken the time to illustrate this. It can be circumvented. Someone can go over it, right? So is it really to block off and to seal something inside, or is it part of something more complicated, some inner workings of different things? There's three.
I think for me, Andrew, I think for me, on the two photos that you've just shown, number one, there was vitrification.
It's shiny. You can see it shine, right?
If you look at the blocks to the right and the left at the extreme bottoms, they almost look like beveled edges.
They do.
We've seen that hallmark all around the ancient world. So was this actually a final product of a specific engineering group that came together that made the internal workings of the Great Pyramid and the pyramids that followed?
I mean, yes.
I think so.
It really looks like the culmination of all those other skills and artifacts in the stone that we see at the other sites. Here we see like the masterpiece opus of that.
Couldn't agree more. And where you looked at the schematic diagram prior to this image, where it shows where you could maybe climb over or move or whatever.
Yeah, lots of different diagrams here.
Yeah, there's many of these. What we've got to look at is, was it maybe water that was in place? Was it gas that was in place? Why would there be vitrification that would be on the portcullis nub at this point in time? And it's what we look at as the workings of the Great Pyramid. Now, nobody actually looks at this. Not that I've found. We've asked the questions for many years. Many years. Why does the portcullis move up and down?
Right.
why would it have a nub onto it? Is
That's
it an
right.
engineering marker? No one will answer us on that, so it looks like it's down to you and I to explain that. Does it or does it not?
And then another good question, I can pull up the actual photo, but in the diagram is a good way to illustrate it too. Where the first step is going into the Grand Gallery, it has been cemented over into a step, but if you look at the old photos, there is a groove in it. So what does that imply? Maybe water flowing over it, or deliberate channeling for water or liquid? Who knows, really, right? It
Well,
could be
it
anything.
depends, mate, because when we've looked at the internal workings, we've looked at vitrification, water, and I don't see that in the portcullis chamber. I really don't. I see where it may have been manipulated by people getting in there,
Mm-hmm.
but what I don't see is heat. I don't see that. It almost seems like it was a working, functional part of the pyramid.
I
Do
think so
you
too.
see the lines on that diagram that you're looking at now?
There we go.
It,
Yeah.
yeah, it almost looks to me like it was gas that was coming through there now.
It's very
We
etched
can
and
talk.
yeah, it's very rough,
Yeah, it is.
pitted,
It is. It doesn't look worn, does it? Like
not
water
normal
was
wear.
running.
Yeah, not the normal wear and tear you would think, or even if it's only supposed to be opened and closed one time for the pharaoh to be buried, yeah, there shouldn't be anywhere.
If it was a burial chamber, why have a functional part at the top of the pyramid when underneath on the separate set to the pyramid you had other functional parts, like you had lines of star alignment that came out of the left hand side of the Great Pyramid.
Right.
You also had separate areas that, like matter, ancient architects has looked at, where there were avenues that you could go into. Were they blocked off? Was it a solid avenue
Yeah.
at some point? Now,
Good
I
question.
think
Yeah.
that may be a point of discussion, but I've got to be honest with you, and this is my own point of view.
Mm-hmm.
I think that maybe the internals of the pyramid was a separate structure, Andrew,
Mm-hmm.
and it may have been encased by later cargo cults, so thus would have given it a far earlier date on its original building.
I mean,
The nub does suggest that
that
to me.
is not something that's unheard of, because if you look up the Lahoun pyramid, what is this? You have a giant mud brick pile, but underneath, it hides megalithic blocks. So
It does.
there is a precedent for this going on in Egypt. So maybe what we are seeing with the Great Pyramids, or the Giza pyramids, maybe, and maybe other pyramids like the Red Pyramid, the Bent Pyramid, you might be looking at an engineer version of what we see here as a cruder version later on. They chose to encase their structure in the middle, their core, and then later on the Egyptians copied that practice. Like with the step pyramid, we were talking about this earlier. The step pyramid, while supposedly being the first and not as good as the Great Pyramid or any of the Giza pyramids, why then at the core of that step pyramid do we have a very impressive megalithic slabbed construction with bevels on it as well?
Yeah, I completely agree with that. And I speak to Dave at Uchronia Utopia and Josh as well, who is very good friends with the doc that unfortunately has passed away now. And I actually think that they've got a point in that maybe they were encasing later with a cargo cult an earlier engineering feat that was functional. Now, people don't look at that. You know, they look at maybe that the mainstream could be correct on that 24 hours a day. We were building a structure for 25 years that could have worked and been functional.
Mm-hmm.
It doesn't ring true to me, Andrew. It rings true to me more that there was an engineering schematic that went on for a long, long time, the geometrics that went on pre-cataclysm and further, that showed our engineering alignment along with the nubs, which is physical evidence, let's be honest.
Agreed.
No one can take that away. and it was a functional part within the portcullis chamber.
Okay, and then we're going to go outside here just to prove the point. Right next door, the Menkaure Pyramid, on the casing stones, we have more of the nubs. Now, the difference here is these are on the outside, and yes, you could say maybe this is later on. This is a restoration effort or a preservation effort. But with the portcullis slab nub, Phil, it's right there at the core. So we really cannot excuse away the nubs in that scenario. And then if it is in the core there, what does that say about the casing stones here? The antiquity of them.
And my problem with that is that we're missing half, if not 3/4,
That's true.
of a full pyramid's worth of casing stones that would have told us exactly what the nub phenomenon was.
Can you just
Now,
imagine, right? I really
can you
imagine.
imagine?
Right. I mean, we know that they're there from what is left, but there is a vast chunk missing. Yes, and we know the stories, right? The stories of these pyramids and their hieroglyphics that were supposedly on their casing stones. I mean, how much closer of a parallel do you need?
I mean, if it was going to be speaking of a language that was written in stone, the ancient wisdom keepers, they can't deny that the Menkaure pyramid would have been encased in that specific language everywhere. Now, we're only looking at the bottom. It's not even a third, it's the smallest part of it.
That's true.
But we see nubs everywhere with the same configuration of polygonal stonework that you and I follow all around the world.
The lipped
It's
blocks,
as
the
simple as
bottom.
that.
Yes, you can see different types of block work, some of the different surface treatments, and then yes, there's a few clear courses where the nubs appear. It is concentrated and clustered in certain cases, and here we have a very good example of an intact row, like you would see in South America at the Sun Gate, or that Naya temple near Baalbek. There's a few examples, or Assos temple in Turkey. There's a few of these where you still have at least a sentence or a phrase or whatever they're saying. You have at least a segment of it intact.
Yeah, I completely agree. And why would you have taken it down?
Mm-hmm.
That begs another point, doesn't it?
Right.
Why would the entirety of that pyramid stone been taken down? Now, we look at religion, we look at other things, but you and I look at physical evidence, and with the internal workings of the Great Pyramid, the portcullis being the workings of it, when we look at the Menkaure Pyramid that would have been covered in it, we can see so many examples of different variations of the nub phenomena.
I mean, there's
that
our
you and I
standard nub.
described.
Right there. We'll zoom in.
The
same as the portcullis slab, right? It is the exact same as the portcullis slab. I mean, right there.
Completely agree.
Yeah.
Semicircular over the top with the standardized straight bottom.
Mm-hmm.
Now, we've looked in our series at all sorts of different variations of nubs, but at this point in time, these are exactly the same mineralogy of the stone that it was encased in.
And right here,
unless I'm wrong here,
it's broken off.
To the right that you're looking at, you've got it broken off. You've got
how close do they
an
want me to get,
inverted
Phil?
nub.
I'll get as close as they want me to get, Phil. Does anyone see wood there? Anyone in the audience see wood or rebar or anything like that? I just see snapped off rock. That's all I see.
Not only that as well, you can see the same images with zero nubs on.
That's true.
And if they were for lifting or climbing or anything else that the mainstream have to offer, these show perfectly the same mineralogy of the stone, regardless, Andrew. Now, you just simply wouldn't lift or move or climb
Absolutely
that same configuration, would you?
No.
If it was in its entirety across a
No.
Now, when we move across the world and we look at that exact same configuration.
Hmm.
And we put what you find at the Menkure pyramid above the doorway.
That's right.
They've got a type 3 configuration of the nubs, standardized. It's standardized above the doorway.
Hmm.
Now we could look at South America with exactly the same configuration of
That's
the
right.
times
And
three.
in Syria, next to a door, sort of over the door at Hosen Suleiman.
Ocean Suleiman is a perfect example as well.
And then, like
Yeah,
Chris at
agreed.
Stone Nub Language has shown us, at the Trikutam Temple, there is a door, what's left of a doorway and a polygonal nubbed wall, and there is a configuration of three nubs, almost in an equilateral triangle, right next to the door. I mean, how
So
many?
I think when it comes to variation, Andrew,
Right.
we can ultimately categorize now that these are definitely 100% functional because we've looked at it at the portcullis chamber
Mm-hmm.
within the Great Pyramid at the beginning of this episode. We've looked at it that it could be a language on the Menkure pyramid because the mineralogy is identical to the stone. It doesn't say to me that it's wood. It doesn't say to me that it's for climbing. We've
Mm-hmm.
got a very good example of opposing nubs that you're looking at now,
Right. Yeah.
where
Four on
you've
one,
got
2 on 1. Yeah. Why these configurations? 3 on 1. You have way too much variation going on here. This is two different levels. Maybe this is, of course, we have the top is broken. So maybe that what we're seeing on the opposing block there with the nubs, we're seeing the bottom of the sentence or whatever that was above the row of nubs that was above.
agree,
I
agree.
mean, just
And if
one.
you look at where the times four is, where
That's right.
you've got the blocks that are broken away,
Mm-hmm.
what if that was the next sentence
Ah,
above that would have been spoken of?
really
The
makes you wonder.
workings of the schematic of that pyramid. The
Mm-hmm.
Menkure isn't the Great Pyramid. Come on. We're looking at a separate pyramid here, but
Yeah.
why would you have a times four configuration? Certainly wasn't to lift that block when you look underneath it that you've got
No.
zero
Of course.
nubs underneath it.
Yeah,
It's not
obviously.
wooden.
No. I'm not
There's no
seeing.
wooden sandbag within there. You
No.
weren't climbing that initial period when you've got a facade at the beginning of it that leads you straight up to it where we'd be taller than it.
That's
So why
true.
would it be there, Andrew? Why
That
would
is
it be
true.
there
Yeah.
if the mainstream attitude was correct?
I really wonder, Phil, if we can't make some serious connections with these patterns to some of these other sites. If we can just get a few good straight head on photos where we can actually measure their profiles, across certain blocks, like in scenarios like this where we have a string of them. I would really like to know at Naya Temple, at the Sun Gate in Peru, and especially the Makari Pyramid, the
Yeah,
Coricancha. I mean, there's so
yeah.
many examples. All those sites in India we're
You've
talking
got
about.
you've got the steps of India that relate
Yeah,
to the Coricancha.
yeah,
You've got the Tamil Nadu wall
of
that
course.
relates to Pleiades, a star configuration.
It looks like
Now,
it.
what it does look like it. Now, if we could take everyone's point of view that looks at this specific hallmark of the nubs,
Right.
that realizes that A, they are exactly the same mineralogy.
I think so. Yes.
They are. Well, come on, they are the same
Yeah.
mineralogy of the
I have to
stone.
say, I've never seen an example where they look like anything else. Every single scenario at every single site all looks like stone.
I would love to see someone show us mineralogy that actually shows it's like wood
Yeah.
within the
Yeah.
workings of the nub.
Agreed.
I would love to see a site where it shows that everything was for climbing,
Yeah.
for argument's sake.
Or any
When
of
we
those
look at the
examples.
Acropolis and the triangular nubs are turned
Yeah.
upside down, why would you climb on top of a point?
You can't grab
You
a pointed.
simply wouldn't,
They would need to
would
be
you?
upside down. The blocks would need to be upside down. Right.
Of course they would. We've looked on that on a prior video
Right.
with Guy, one of our team,
Mm-hmm.
where he looked at with us a configuration at the Acropolis
Mm-hmm.
where you would need the nub turned upside down. It means absolutely no chance that that Acropolis nub was for climbing, doesn't it?
No, yeah, and again, that's another variation of the shape and profile of the nubs that might be, just specific to that region. We could also look at some of the ones in Peru that might be just specific to that region, but we do have this one standardized shape that seems to echo everywhere. So if that was maybe one specific builder or group's marker, that group seemed to be ubiquitous or the most skilled and the most, well traveled.
But it still stands out the point that there was a worldwide engineering culture that
Absolutely.
used this specific
They
hallmark
were all
on
using it.
every single temple, including the inner workings of the Great Pyramid, which includes, might I add, the portcullis chamber that we have surmised water, gas, or whatever functionality that pyramid had
Sure.
would have had to have had inside it, because it's right there
Hmm.
on the workings of it
And
with the portcullis.
and you bring up a good point with the water marker because, like we've seen at the Osirion, we have nub markers that are below the water level line today. So what does that imply? You can only see them when the water level is at certain depths and times of the year. The tides. That it seems like a sophisticated system to me. Like India as well has some of these step wells with maybe just one or two nubs on them. Again, marker levels for like half full or getting to the drought period or what have you.
Well, that comes down to variation
Mm-hmm.
of specific nubs, doesn't it? And what me and you have literally looked into since we found the nubs is the variation of specific nubs. Now, water level markers, i.e. functional, like we've looked at in the Great Pyramid. We've looked at the Menkaure Pyramid now as a specific variation.
Mm-hmm.
Now,
Where
there
would you like to
has
go?
to be a worldwide phenomenon. You and I have spoken about this so many times. Why does it show this in the Assyrian, underneath the waterline, above the waterline?
Yep, along the back wall.
Which,
Mm-hmm.
yeah, I mean, why have we got a nub that is exactly the same as you find at the Coricancha?
That square one, very, very
We,
square. The only one really like that in comparison to all these others. This one over here is very square. I have a better
it's
photo.
exactly the same at the
Mm.
Coricancha nub.
I wish I would
We've
zoom.
got
There it
such
is. Mhm.
variation. The Coricancha to Egypt. Now, why were they
Yeah.
near to each other, Andrew?
You mean the small filler
Well,
stones? That's at the Coricancha as well, right? Multiple hallmarks.
yeah, agreed. You've got inverted nubs
That's
at the
true.
Assyrian.
Yep.
Plus, as well, you've got to look at it subterranean, isn't it?
Yeah,
So
let's
it's a
let's go back to that old
different
photo.
level engineering
Where's my old
marker.
I love this old photo. I mean, it just says it all. Over here on the
Yeah,
right, you have a block with nubs on it that's right at the level where the water is today. So that's why you cannot see these today. And it just makes you wonder,
I,
are there more
I
around there?
I can remember LAH, a very trusted channel to you and
Right.
mine
Great researchers,
recently.
really great researchers.
Fantastic. Skylove, probably one of my heroes, and thank you very much for everything that
Yes.
you've done.
Their team is great.
Their team is fantastic, and we've emulated that sort of team with
Yes, we do a
what
lot of the
we
same kind of
brought
stuff,
together.
guys.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
really check them out.
Two.
We'll put a link in the description for their channel.
Yeah, they're fantastic. And to note that the variation could adhere to water level, could also adhere to manufacturing, could
Sure.
adhere to, like we've discussed in the Great Pyramid, the functionality.
Yeah, something
It's
functional, right?
proven. It's proven within the stone.
Mm-hmm.
There's no way that people can look past that, is there,
Yeah,
Andrew?
yeah,
It's right there in front of you.
yes. They are much more than the simple explanations. We are looking at least language of some kind. But then yes, there could be all kinds of different things you can say and do with these nubs.
I'd like to go and have a look at some examples, maybe in the Coricancha, where we get very
Sure.
straight, square, ornate examples within the Coricancha.
We'll jump
We've
right over
looked
there. Mm-hmm.
this,